Hi, I'm Katie. We're here in the Deadline studio with Dan Farah for the documentary Age of Disclosure. Dan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I wanted to just start kind of broadly by asking where your interest in this topic came from and when you decided that you wanted to, explore it in a documentary format.
Awesome. Yeah, my interest in the topic really comes from movies. My childhood was in the 80s and early 90s, and I grew up watching movies like Close Encounters and E.T. and Fire in the Sky over and over and over, especially Close Encounters. Um, that's hands down my favorite film. And, those movies piqued my curiosity in this topic and these big questions of whether we're alone in the universe, whether the US government's actually more aware of information about this than they've shared with the public. Um, so I feel like the interest that was piqued by those movies kind of fueled this lifelong interest in the topic and consuming any kind of like article or documentary or book about it. And ultimately, I decided I wanted to make the documentary that I wish existed. You know, a really credible, serious, non-sensational documentary that sets the bar at only interviewing people who have direct knowledge of this topic as a result of working for the U.S. government in some capacity. And yeah, that was my motivation, and I was really just setting off to make the film that I wish as a viewer that I wish existed to watch.
Yeah, and it's kind of a tall order though, to get that level of authority in a documentary like this. And
Yeah.
I'm curious what the process of that was like to get all of these people to open up on camera.
Yeah, it was challenging. I early in my process when I was doing research on the topic, I got introduced to several really high level former intelligence officials who worked the topic for the U.S. government, and started forming relationships with them. Um, some of them were kind of like my go-to support for help opening, getting other doors opened, and helping socialize what I was trying to do. And one introduction led to another. Ultimately, I think a lot of the people I interviewed participated because I had put together a safe environment where they were surrounded by many other very credible, high level active officials or former officials, and there was strength in numbers. So I wasn't asking any one person to kind of go out on a limb and be out there on their own talking about this stuff. Um, and other thing that is really important to touch on is a lot of the people I interviewed have knowledge that they can't legally talk about, right? And I never asked them to do that, and I would never ask them to do that. But there's this whole other category of knowledge they have on this topic that they can lawfully legally disclose, and they just historically been discouraged from doing so. So what I was asking them to do was to comfortably disclose what they legally could, in the context of this documentary where they would be arm in arm with other credible people. And so, a lot of people obviously ultimately wrapped their head around doing that and decided to do it. Um, some people ultimately decided that they were worried about the stigma around the topic, or they thought that they would be in danger by participating. Um, so I ended up interviewing and including in the film, um, you know, 34 high level military government intelligence officials, but there were a number of people who ultimately chose not to participate as well.
As you were going through and doing these interviews and collecting all of this information, I'm sure there might be several answers to this question, but what struck you the most, or what piece of information kind of like struck you by surprise a little bit?
I would say that the thing that surprises me the most is once I realized that once I learned from my interview subjects that there is a there, that this is a very real situation, a serious situation. And once I learned from the interview subjects how truly bipartisan it is also within our government, like senior officials from both political parties are taking this extremely seriously. It's to my knowledge, it's the only thing the leadership of both parties actually agree on, right? So what was surprising to me is that despite it being so serious and real, and despite it being so bipartisan, the average person has no idea about any of it. Like it's the public is very much in the dark on this, and that to me is the most surprising thing.
Yeah, to your point, there doesn't feel like there is much these days that is a bipartisan issue, and I'm curious, exploring that through that lens of the bipartisanship of it, and hearing from political leaders on both sides of the aisle how that informed your perspective on the topic, and just um, what you learned from seeing these two parties come together on something when they don't usually.
Well, it made me realize more than ever that it's a really serious situation, and that I felt a lot of weight on my shoulders to responsibly make the documentary in a way that relays how serious this is, right? And make sure I kept that tone and made sure that it didn't come across sensational at all, and treated it with the seriousness and respect that the situation deserves.
What questions do you still have, or wish to still explore about this topic?
Well, I think we'll have to see what happens next. There's a real focused effort within our government to bring out the truth on this. Leaders in both parties are actively trying to make disclosure happen to the extent that it legally can. Senator Rounds is still fighting for the UAP Disclosure Act that him and Senator Schumer proposed. Senator Schumer was the Senate Majority Leader when he first pushed the UAP Disclosure Act with Senator Rounds. They're trying to push it through again this year. The House just announced a new committee 2 weeks ago called the Committee to Declassify Federal Secrets, and the chairwoman is Representative Luna, who's also in the film, and she's very bullish on making disclosure happen. That's a bipartisan committee. The leadership from both parties are involved. So there are elected officials in government right now who are very actively trying to disclose more information about this topic to the public. And I think this film is going to play a big role in that. I've heard from senior members of the current administration that they're very excited about the documentary. They're excited for it to get out there to the public. They think it'll be helpful in what they're trying to do to push for disclosure. And it's interesting. It's somewhere along the way of making this movie, my documentary about disclosure literally became disclosure.
Yeah. I just want to end by asking, why is this disclosure so important to you, and why do you think that it's something that the American public should know about?
I think that there's people, it's not just the American public. I think people all over the world have been interested in this topic for a long time. And there's a lot of people like me who grew up super curious about, what the truth is on this stuff. And I think that, what the interview subjects in my documentary reveal is that there's a lot of information on this topic that affects us all. And so I feel like the public has a right to know basic information. Obviously, a lot of things still should be kept secret for good reason, for national security. But base facts, like we're not alone in the universe, it's one of the biggest questions in the history of humanity. If the answer is definitively yes, like we should all know that.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks for having me.